So the more I focus on the process and learning and evaluating what I can do based off what I can learn from it and less what I can gain from it, more from what value I can add, less from what I can take from it, that's where the magic happens.
All right, Leigh-Ann Buchanan, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Will.
Of course. No, it's an honor to have you here. I appreciate you coming up and coming to the studio. And we were just talking offline. We've met virtually a bunch of times, right? We've connected on Twitter and social media, located in Miami for years, but this is the first time we've actually had a chance to be in the same space. Even though, like, I'm sure, like, if we went back, there were events that we were probably at.
I'm pretty sure we must have crossed paths unknowingly, but this is more intentional, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Excited to have you here. So for our listeners that don't know you, can you give a quick background on yourself and then kind of how it ties into how you started your career and eventually got to where you are today?
Whew, that is a loaded question.
Yeah, pick any starting point.
So how I describe myself is actually, I'm really focused on superpowers right now.
I love that.
And so I am a strategist, a writer, and a facilitator. And I think those represent a couple of superpowers that I have, which is really around communication, strategy, and connection. Okay. But I'm also a recovering attorney. So my career and time here in Miami really started, I was a former complex commercial litigator that specialized in white collar defense and a lot of fraud and really cool projects. And then I switched into the innovation sector, as you know, and launched the organization, which is now known as Aire Ventures, but previously we took the name Venture Cafe, which was our primary program. And over the last 5 years, it's been an exciting time. We've seen Miami tech grow exponentially. And I'd like to say that the work that you've done and the work that I've done has played a contributing role. At least with Venture Cafe, you know, I was the founding executive director, and we are getting ready to turn that back over to the original license holder in a little bit. But we've seen about 54,000 people come through the primary program, which was the Thursday gathering, and a couple other ones as well. And what I love is that we've partnered with about 1,000 organizations during that time, which is, I think, unheard of in terms of just this community space that's really about bridging across lines of different socioeconomic levels, and really just all of the ways that we often find points of division, we've been able to connect, and inclusively and, you know, representationally. I think about 71% of people that have participated in the programming over the last 5 years, people of color, 49% women, 33% startup founder or employee, and 34% growth stage. So as you can tell, I love data, but data to me gives you kind of an indicator.
It gives you the roadmap, right?
Exactly who you're serving and why.
No, I love that. For the folks that don't know about Venture Cafe, can you give like a kind of like a high level what it was and like how it's transformed?
Yeah, so Venture Cafe is part of a global network of organizations, nonprofits specifically, closely affiliated with Cambridge Innovation Center, that really work on convening and connecting in emerging entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystems. And so I had the pleasure of really scaling that entity, that platform up in Miami from idea and domain name to what it has become, which is really a real central point for connectivity. And there are venture cafes around the world. I believe there are about 10 that exist in Warsaw and Rotterdam, Japan, Sydney, and here in the continental United States, we also have venture cafes in Boston, run by Innovation Studio, Philadelphia, and St. Louis.
Very cool. Very cool. So folks can check that out because there are venture cafes all over the country. So what led to the decision to rebrand things to Aire Ventures? And how does it differentiate from a mission perspective?
So I love that you use rebrand because a lot of the newspapers have not actually used that terminology.
Yeah, they think you're launching something new. Right?
We just changed our legal entity name. And what the decision to focus on to rebrand to Aire Ventures was really responsive to where we see the ecosystem here in South Florida, as well as others around the country that are at. So if there's a lot of study that looks at the life cycle of a tech and innovation ecosystem, and at early stages when you really got involved, like there's stuff happening, but it's really disparate, and there's pockets of things happening. You know, Waffle Wednesdays was like one of the first real connectors. You know, Venture Cafe followed the lab. And so when we started 5 years ago, what the ecosystem's real need was like, how do we bring all this together? Really kind of connecting, programming, you know, creating new partnership opportunities. Well, a lot has changed. And now there's a big need, particularly with a lot of this movement and spotlight on Miami tech. We need infrastructure. We need a roadmap. We need a plan. We need some data-driven benchmarks to help us really realize what we could be in terms of potential as an ecosystem.
There needs to be intention and execution right now.
And the name is, and we focus on READY ecosystems, READY being an acronym for racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm lazy. I don't want to say all those words, so I just say ready.
That's awesome. Is your community ready?
Exactly. Are you ready? So that's the question we help folks answer. But the idea is somebody's got to be an ecosystem architect that says, I'm not going to do the programming. I'm just going to focus on strategy and really stand behind those builders to help us create a cohesive plan. So we're not just marching in different directions. The analogy that I like to use, Will, is like baking a cake. Very simply, if you're baking a cake, you got all your ingredients, eggs, you know, sugar, a little oil, if you make sure it's nonstick, flour, and you got baking powder, all of these things. But if you throw that in the oven, and we're right now in an oven in the Miami Tech kind of inflection point.
Literally and figuratively.
Literally. Soon to be a hotter oven in a couple months. But you throw that in the oven, you get a hot mess. But when you create the right pan, you figure out what's the pan, you make sure the measurements are right, then you get what you envision, which is a cake. Right now, we need a pan. And so that's our focus, is the strategy, the infrastructure. How do we create those tools that are for the ecosystem to really become what it could be?
That's awesome. Like, we have to be super intentional about all these things like inclusion and equity, and it has to be part of, you said, the DNA of what we do. It's woven into the fabric of the things that we stand for. And I think Miami Tech and the startup community here, it's a great opportunity because we could form the identity of the community, because we've been doing this for a long time. We've been here a long time, and we're also a very welcoming community because South Florida is built on transits. You know, we're built on immigrants. So we welcome that. We love that. We embrace that, but there has to be some kind of intention in doing so versus like, come on, and let's figure it out as we go, right? That's not going to be the recipe for success.
We cannot just, as Facebook says, move fast and break things when it comes to ecosystem building. And the name Aire is just simply that ready ecosystems do not come out of thin air. Literally. They must be intentionally designed, as you say, in collaboration and with a plan.
So how do you think, like, what's some like blocking and tackling, like executionary things that we would start with as a community, maybe some initiatives that you start with, and maybe also some calls to action for listeners to think about on ways that they can get involved in that sense?
So a couple of tactical points, because you are like me, like theory is great, but let's figure out what we're actually going to do. So the way that our work evolves in any given community, and it's really starting right here in Miami in collaboration and partner with Knight Foundation, is we got to start with an assessment. Where are we? You're going to launch a product, you always kind of do your user experience, you assess the market, you really get an understanding of where we are. So that's what we're doing. There's two parts to the assessment. It's gathering qualitative data and quantitative data. So we've already started that qualitative data gathering part, where since last November, we've actually been doing these deep dives. I know we're going to sit down with a deep dive shortly with different leaders and orgs to really understand what are the gaps, the assets, the opportunities, and the priorities. Publicly, we've also been hosting these focus groups and town halls on ready ecosystem around Miami Tech, starting with just generally, how do we achieve this, to the talent pipeline, to access to capital, and rounding it out with the regional advantage that's happening, February 25th, 2021. Next is what I'm really excited about. That's going to be the Ready Ecosystem Challenge, which is a scorecard. Literally, I hate to use the word survey, but it's literally a assessment that we're going to send out in partnership with a lot of the orgs we've been collaborating with. What I think makes this different is we're looking at 4 primary domains of understanding both the experience and key performance indicators. So in terms of the people domain, what we're looking at is people, mentorship. We're also looking at access to those resources that you're going to need. In the network domain, we're looking at on-ramps and opportunities to connect and how you navigate resources. In terms of the policy and funding domain, we're going to be looking at access to capital and the infrastructure, government policy supports that really help entrepreneurs. And then in the narrative domain, we're going to be looking at storytelling, identity, and also the metrics and learning.
Right.
So all of these specific KPIs and data points are going to give us a clearer picture if we get a fraction of the 54,000 folks that have come through.
Right.
That's going to be huge data point for us to develop a roadmap of action items and priorities. And then what I'll say, Will, is with this scorecard, the way we're going to distribute it, it's kind of different. We're actually going to partner with organizations, and each org that becomes a scorecard partner will get a unique data set.
Right.
So while there's a community data set and report that's going to be released, they'll get one that's uniquely calibrated to its respondents. So they can then compare, how do we measure up as a micro community, which I don't think I've seen done before,
Right.
but that's actually how you add value to these great building orgs that really may not have the bandwidth, the dollars to pay for a tool like this.
That makes sense. So there's this data set, you're going to kind of, send it out to all these different folks in the community and then triangulate kind of everything that's going on.
And release everything, make it
Nice.
available to everybody. And then I think it will help us, then we'll help convene folks like you, folks like the Beacon Council, for example. And then what the data shows in terms of priorities, we pick 3 or 4 and say, as a community, this aspect of talent, this aspect of access to funding, this is what we can all get behind. And just like the Miami Manifesto, the We Are Tech Manifesto, we can have something that says, here's our strategic priorities.
Right. No, I love that. And by the way, hats off to you and the whole team that worked on the Miami Tech Manifesto. I thought that was a great initiative. Again, goes back to what you were saying about setting some kind of mentality and ethos for what we want to build collectively together and set folks in the right direction to start, right?
Exactly.
So great job on that. How do you think a community should think internally about being more equitable and inclusive? Like, just what are some things that we need to start processing? We're going to get the survey and the questionnaire. We're going to do all that stuff. But what are some things that we need to start thinking about foundationally before we get there?
So READY is a great acronym. Like you said, it's empowering. It makes us want to take action.
Let's get ready.
But what does it really mean? Because these terms like racial equity, diversity, inclusion, these are really amorphous terms. The way that I define READY is beginning to look at how do we ensure that there's equitable access to opportunities, equitable access to resources, and belonging, cultivating a culture of belonging. And it's a mindset that's both individual and community-wide. But I think if you're looking at those guideposts that really look at every aspect of an ecosystem, that's almost like a filter or a lens through which you operate in your daily life, that's a first way to adopt the thinking. The second thing that I'll say is, what does an ecosystem mean?
Right, exactly.
What are the components? I say an ecosystem to me is defined, and I wrote a blog post about this recently, 6 Ps. I'm very tactical. If I can look at where I overlay this READY lens in terms of the priorities. So we got the manifesto. There's a specific statement that says we're driven by inclusive values. That's about READY.
Right.
But then there's a couple other Ps, which is the priorities. That's the roadmap. It'll be undergirded by READY. Then there's the platforms that we have from government. You see the county and the local government, even things like the work that you're doing. How do we overlay READY? And then beyond that, it's looking at partnerships and programs and those, and then the people. That's the mindset piece. How do we make sure that we're attaching a READY mindset or framing to each one of those components? To me, that's the most simple way to explain how do we actually get started versus just saying, we need to be racially equitable and diverse and inclusion. Let's look at specific areas that we can focus in on.
Let's forget the buzzwords and let's focus tactically on the things that we need to do, not just say things because they sound good, right?
And that's where data comes in.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have data, then you're not actually going to be having a framework for accountability.
Right. Right. So we're going to get a playbook that's based on data, which is terrific.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And then the other thing we're thinking about, Will, is there's so much happening in terms of resources, but there's no one-stop shop. There's no like filtering mechanism.
Gotcha.
So one of the projects that we're looking to stand up in partnership again with a lot of the organizations is how do we then create that navigational tool? Refresh has something.
Sure.
The Beacon Council has something. The county has something. The city has something. There's 1,000,010 guides, but you have to go 1,000,010 places to find them. So one of the quick ecosystem tactical tools that we're going to be working on is just like a filtering piece. How do you connect to everybody that's already put stuff out there that's been validated through a partnership with a group called EcoMap, and it'll amplify all the existing like micro subsets of resources, but help people better navigate where they are if they're not in the know, like you and me.
Right. I love that. And we've talked a lot from a South Florida perspective, but this could be something used in any community, correct?
Of course.
Nationwide.
That's
right?
the plan.
That's awesome. So folks that are listening, definitely check it out. It's going to be like Aire Ventures, right? .com. Very cool. Very cool.
.org.
.org. Sorry. aireventures.org. We're going to drop the link in the description so folks can check it out. In the sense, like one of the things, and I'll tie back to Miami Tech, again, from that perspective, but I think it generally applies to tech communities. One of the things I've heard from some peers that there's a lot of focus on Miami Tech. But really what we should be talking about is Miami innovation, right?
Exactly.
Not tech. Because not everything is tech, but there's amazing, brilliant people innovating in so many different sectors. Like I'll give like a shout out to like Richard Lamondon and Ecosystems, right?
That's great.
That's not a tech company, right? But they're an innovation company, right? Things like that. I can go on and on about companies that are like that. How do you think about that? Is there credence to that where like maybe we should try to just stop talking about tech and more so just all the innovators that are here?
So if you look at our website, we say innovators. We only use the word innovators. I actually like to think about the ecosystem that we work in terms of TIE, again, an acronym, a little bit lazy, tech, innovation, and entrepreneurship. I think terminology, I like to write, I think terminology can be really alienating. And when you're looking at readiness, a lot of communities have been, they've been divorced from the identity of tech, even innovation. So I like to say TIE with entrepreneurship. I think it's important that we begin to look at even how we frame these conversations to do so from a lens of ready or equity. And love Richard. I love a lot of the folks here that are doing really innovative things. I'm not tech, but I'm definitely doing something innovative 100%, and I'm 100%. Definitely supporting innovators. So I think it's important for us to be responsible about our language. And then when we can, to take the opportunity to be inclusive with the language that we use. Right.
Tech is just one way somebody can be innovative, but there's so many different things that...
It's a tool.
Right.
Tech is a tool that can be used to improve the human condition.
Right.
Tech is simply a vehicle.
Right.
It is not the end. It's a means.
We're speaking of the end goal being a huge revolutionary leap forward in efficiency in some way. That could be through software, and it could be through something like what you're doing, which is Aire Ventures, which is building the systems in place to apply to any community. That's innovation in its own right. So, no, I like that for sure. The show is called Lessons via Leaders. So we like to talk about, as a central theme, lessons we've learned over our career that has served us well. What is one particular piece of advice that you've received over the years that you hold near and dear to your heart? Could be from a mentor, colleague, family member that's like, just something that really has stuck with you. Maybe it's a way of thinking or a belief or saying. It could be anything.
So I think a lot. If anybody follows me on Instagram, they know I literally spend like 2 hours thinking every day and writing. So my personal mantra is what I'll share. So every day I say people, purpose, and impact over everything else. And the reason why I focus on those things is because it's so easy to lose sight of your personal mission or your personal purpose. And I have found success and impact when I focus exclusively on that. And sometimes it's to the exclusion of opportunities. It's sometimes to the exclusion of funders who will say, we'd love to fund you. And I'm like, no, thank you, because it doesn't align. Sometimes it's to the exclusion of partnerships. Sometimes it's to the exclusion of relationships. But I found it becomes a really good barometer for helping me understand how to stay focused on the prize, the vision, the end goal. And it also becomes a filter through which I evaluate opportunities, my time, and where our strategic direction as an organization is going. So I think it's important. It doesn't have to be my mantra, but having a mission statement.
Right.
In The Infinite Game, I think it's the new book by Simon Sinek. He talks about the just cause, right? If you have a clear just cause that you can distill into a really clear, succinct statement, use that as your barometer.
Oh, I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. How about as far as in your field and your career as a lawyer and then moving into Venture City, what are some of lessons that you learned, maybe one or two during that time that you've applied now into going into Aire Ventures?
So a lesson that I have learned, at least in the professional space, this is a good one. So one of my strengths is Achiever under Strength Finder. I don't know if you've done Strength Finder before.
No, never.
Oh my God, you totally
Strength
need
Finder?
Strength Finder.
Okay,
I'm going to send it to you
right now. Oh yeah, send it to me.
You should totally do it. So there's 5 domains typically of themes. 4 out of 5 of mine are in strategy.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird, but whatever, we'll go with that. But the other one's an achiever, and I'm a type A personality. So most of my life has really been about like, let's achieve this. Like I finished high school when I was 15. I finished college when I was 19. I finished law school when I was 23. Amazing. So I'm on my second career. Like I've been very much like an achiever.
Yeah.
And recently I have learned that I will always be going after the wrong thing if I'm focused on outcomes exclusively, rather than experiences and learning.
Yeah.
One of my other strengths is as a learner. And so I'm just focused on learning things. So the more I focus on the process and learning and evaluating what I can do based off what I can learn from it and less what I can gain from it, more from what value I can add, less from what I can take from it, that's where the magic happens. I
love that, because then the outcome is the byproduct of the journey and the learning and the experiences, right? As opposed to being, I got to get there and I'll have to figure out how. You got to figure out the map and the path, and then the outcome will be the outcome as the byproduct. Exactly.
And it creates, again, you become more finite in your thinking if you're outcome determinant versus experience determinant. And it allows for you to be more creative and flexible and innovative as a leader if you're focused on the experience. It doesn't mean you don't have a goal. Trust me, I have a plan, a goal, a project map, always. But I can be flexible and pivot, perhaps in the way that I may not have been able to pivot with ease before I adopted this mindset. And as a litigator, my job was litigation strategy, really. And you're not going to know what the other side's going to do. You can anticipate, but a judge might rule a different way and you got to respond. Sure. So really having that process-oriented mindset helps you stay sane.
I love that. I'm interested I'm pulling on some threads here, but your transition from being a lawyer into what you're doing now, right?
Yes.
So you say like, you're a recovering lawyer, or like, this is on your second career. What made you decide, okay, I'm done with being a lawyer. This is the path that I want to go on. I'm curious about that, because I know a lot of lawyers listen to the podcast. Some love their job. Some might be thinking about other things. Some might be thinking, how can my law career serve me in other capacities versus being just an attorney? Would love to get your perspective on all that.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple things. Yeah. I'll end with the translation of the skills, and I'll start on a personal note.
Okay.
So I loved practicing law. I still have my license, and I'd want to be a lawyer since I was 4 years old. So literally,
was this like you were, convincing your parents to get something or do something?
No,
like you should be a lawyer
independently.
Oh, really?
I've always said I wanted to be a lawyer. I guess maybe I just realized lawyers were really smart people.
Okay.
And they seem to have a lot of respect, and they seem to be able to get things done from like watching I don't even know, since I was 4. So it's been like my lifelong goal. And interestingly enough, I was practicing, and I remember, I did really well at my firm, really high billing associate, worked on the best cases. And I was sitting with a law partner, and we're having this conversation, and he was explaining how his life went. Yeah. And he said, you have it. You can you have the rainmaking capacity. You're bringing in clients. Like, you can be partner. You will do well. But you will also not have a life. You may be like me. You may, be divorced multiple times. Your kids hate you, and you spend all your time serving clients. So that was like point number 1. I was like, is that really the life that I want? And I'm not saying that that's the life of all lawyers, but it made me really begin to think about what is the quality of life that I want.
Right.
Secondly, I'm also the founder of a nonprofit, which is actually under the Aire Ventures umbrella as one of the ventures that we're helping to scale, called the Nia Project. And what the NIA Project does is it helps to fill systemic opportunity gaps for youth of color in terms of leadership exposure through an international fellowship and then college access through an ed tech platform. Now, when I run the fellowship, so we were sitting, I remember it to the T, Costa Rica, this big house that we had rented. We were doing our evening like highs and lows, reflection activity. And I was asking the kids, guys, what are you proud of? What are you most proud of? And they were telling me. Then they flipped the script on me. And they said, Miss Leigh-Ann, what are you most proud of? And I did not say my legal career. And literally, I still remember in that moment, I was like, I don't think I need to be doing this anymore. So much of what fulfilled me was the work that I was doing in the American Bar Association around criminal justice policy, in the community around leadership with the NIA Project. And I was more focused on impact. And I realized that what I saw from the tech companies was they were forward thinking, they were investing money, they were thinking innovatively about real problems of, I would say, the human condition, real problems in our communities, in our world, and approaching it in a very different way.
And breaking paradigms.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And I was like, I don't even think outside the box. I don't even believe there is a box. So I probably need to be in the innovation space and not practicing law.
That's awesome. But I'm sure, again, a lot of the skills that you've amassed practicing law has applied very, very well to.
100%. Every day I say, so I, offline we're talking about, I speak a lot virtually. I'm a trial lawyer by trade. So
I'm a good orator.
Exactly. But also used to explaining complex concepts to regular folks. How do you distill? Another skill that works out well for grant writing. And also I write a blog. I write a lot.
Awesome.
And so the writing, being a litigator, you're pushing out 25, 50, 60-page briefs a week. Reading a lot and really looking at, particularly in litigation, how you can bring disparate concepts together to create a very clear framework for people to understand. So a lot of these skills, the networking, the relationships, and the analytical capacity translates so well into this innovation space.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember my parents were pushing me to be a lawyer, and my dad, he is a lawyer still to this day, but my dad, he runs a little bit, warm-tempered sometimes, especially when he's practicing law and he gets passionate about a topic. And I just remember many times when I was growing up, he would just be so frustrated with his career. It was just like kind of just obvious how much it was getting to him, how stressed out he was. So like one day when like it was time for me to pick a major and I didn't pick law, he's like, why didn't you pick being a lawyer like your dad? I was like, Dad, I saw how stressed you were. He's okay, you're right. That's a good choice. You know what I mean? And I know some lawyers love their job and some lawyers kind of fall into it. So like you said, there has to be like a passion, behind it, right? It's not kind of one size fits all with law profession.
And law is a flexible enough career and passion that you can make it work for you. I do not regret becoming a lawyer, and I do not regret going to law school, because the way in which you are taught to adjust your thinking as a lawyer, as an engineer, perhaps as a journalist, it serves you so well in other disciplines.
Gives you more of an analytical mind.
For sure.
Right? You're not biased on one way or another, right? You have to be open-minded.
Exactly.
Have to learn how to articulate your point of view, like you said, to kind of convince people or, to show them at least the right way to look, right?
And the other thing I think for me personally is I recognize now that I'm clearly a systems thinker. Like that's just how I work. But as a litigator, you are also looking at a system. You're looking at a large case, trying to understand the permutations, the nuances. And so I realized that discipline around litigation helped refine my capacity as a systems thinker. And I always say the systemic problems that are most pervasive, that we're trying to deal with, require ecosystem solutions, and that's why I'm in this ecosystem building space.
Yeah, that makes sense. We talked about lessons learned, but is there mistakes that you've seen, common mistakes that people make when it comes to equity and inclusivity, right? Which is such an important topic, especially in the past year, right? A lot of the things have been kicked up and we really need to focus on making significant change. What are some like mistakes you see people make that, maybe it's deserving of a more thoughtful approach?
So there's misconceptions, misnomers. I'll start with a couple. The first is that hiring a D&I expert will solve all your problems.
Can you tell the people what a D&I?
And I know a D&I expert is diversity and inclusion, or DEI, diversity,
you're
equity,
basically
inclusion.
Offloading the responsibility to someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
we all have shared responsibility
Right.
and accountability to address ready issues.
Correct.
And so I think the biggest mistake is thinking that you can just hire someone and it will go away. It's a leadership problem, and it's a leadership imperative, and everybody is a leader in that respect.
Yes.
The other thing I also think is people think you need to be an expert to actually address ready issues. You don't. If you are a human being and you're alive and you have the capacity to listen, you have all the expertise in this moment that you need to get started. And so I think there's this hesitance or this reticence to address ready issues because you think you need to get more educated, or you need more capacity, or you need more skills. You just need to be an empathetic person that cares,
Yes.
and that's all you need. The other thing that I would say is that the biggest mistake I think people make is that they can just put out a manifesto without any action. And even the manifesto team, we said, this is a starting point. We will follow this up with action. This is a living document. So you saw a lot of performative activity. I'm going to post a black square, or we're going to put a statement out.
Right.
I would say, and Sherelle Dorsey at The Plug does such good data-driven journalism and insights on this. Don't put out a statement until you know what your data says, because you might be an experience like we're seeing right now with certain large, big tech companies who shall not be named, that, you got to make sure what's on the inside matches the outside. It's almost better for you to not put out a statement, or say, we are not putting out a statement because we need to do a hard look internally, and we want to make sure that whatever we say is not performative and actually reflective of actionable oriented strategies. The last thing I would say is, we know that racial inequality, marginalization, and systemic oppression has a cost. I think Citi economists put out a study a couple months ago that it said it was like $16 trillion to try to address the racial wealth gap that is the direct result of discriminatory practices, policies, and culture. So if you are wanting to address readiness with any degree of earnest urgency and real caring, you got to put some money behind it. It is not something that you can just address by saying, hey, come speak to me for free. No, you got to put some money behind it. You got to put your money where your mouth is. And it doesn't mean that you have to, you just got to think about looking at what you're spending on other things and make sure ready is appropriately accounted for.
No, I love that. And you tied into the manifesto and what's going on there. So I want to pull on that thread a little bit. We are being very conscious of this moment. And I think, we're present, we're in it, and we're asking ourselves actively, how could we do things better, right? And the manifesto is a byproduct of that mentality. But I'm wondering, what can we do to not repeat the same mistakes of other ecosystems? And what mistakes specifically have we seen in other communities that we could fix here? The manifesto, like you said, is a great start, but we need to build off of that. Let's talk about the things that we can do by first identifying what, is maybe the wrong approach.
Yeah. I think the wrong approach is that we didn't start with readiness in terms of like we just talked about, being very intentional about what that looks like. And love the manifesto. It's a visionary statement. It is not, and it's like a visionary statement, some guideposts. So tactically, what can we focus on? So there's something that I'm really working on quietly, and hopefully we'll be able to make it more public in a couple of months. But Miami Tech is having a moment, but what about tech equity in Miami? Tech can be a tool to improve the lives of every Miamian. We recognize that. We know that, I'm in the nonprofit space. When you're tech enabled or you have a business model, you can actually expand exponentially your impact. So tech is a tool of exponential impact. So how do we do that is the big question. There's a couple of areas where I think that we can make some strategic investments, and it's going to cost some dollars, but also collaboration from funders, partners, private sector, public sector, leaders like yourself and Rebecca Monson that was involved in the writing of the manifesto. How do we create a tech equity initiative that helps us look at what are the drivers of inequity that can be solved through a focus on technology? There's a couple of ones. There's 5 that I'm thinking about. One is access. Literally, 26% of Americans do not have access to the internet. And I think well over 30% are not smartphone enabled.
Mm-hmm.
And that is exacerbated in terms of our community here in Miami. We're talking about 5G. There are communities like places in Overtown and Liberty City where you do not have access to internet at home for children. How are you supposed to do Florida virtual school? How are you supposed to just get lost on the internet learning about things like I'm sure the rabbit hole that you often might get to when you open up your browser. Yep. And smartphones are not sufficient. You can't get a job right now without the internet or without a computer. And I think the pandemic has exacerbated and illuminated where those big disparities exist. So digital divide. Yep. Second area, pipeline. And we did a whole town hall on this. K-12 pipeline. We know that Miami has significant disparities socioeconomically based off of zip codes. We also know that your likelihood for success in life is determined by your third grade reading skills. Another indicator and another important, I would say, like economic mobility tool is exposure to technology, STEAM, STEM education. CS is not mandatory, but we know that the average income for a tech job is $90,000 a year. Yep. So really looking at K-12 pipeline, getting AP computer science and some of these engineering, robotics opportunities in the school system is making sure that certain kids, particularly Black and brown low-income kids, are not locked out of the pipeline. K-Poor Center calls it the leaky tech pipeline from the front end. Third area, talent, upskilling. You know, Winco just was acquired by BrainStation, Career Karma, my friend Ruben out in the Bay Area doing really great work connecting people with boot camps.
Iron Hack.
They just got another dose of dollars. So upskilling in the tech and tech adjacent opportunities is really important for our community, and it can be done. Two other quick areas. One is looking at small business. Miami is a small business city. We are, I think 81% of the population, of the working population is employed by small businesses. We are the highest concentration of micro businesses per capita in the country. That's not going to change. We can create a tech hub, but we can't forget that Miami is built off the backs of small businesses. So how do we get our small businesses more tech enabled? That's a tech equity imperative, where we saw during COVID-19 that small businesses that were not tech enabled, that did not have the digital transformation, that were locked out of access to capital because they weren't papered through quick tech tools, like even using Square as your system, could not get access to federal dollars and could not get access. So 41% of Black-owned small businesses failed last year. And we're seeing the number increase in markets like Miami. Last area is tech can solve opportunity gaps in marginalized communities. But a lot of the people that are closest to those issues don't have the friends and family dollars or that first money in to validate some of these tech ideas. Even think about Code for Miami, some of the great work that they're doing. Some of the things that we saw at the gatherings, great ideas. So we need just a little bit of risk capital for some of these Kickstarter great ideas that are solving opportunity gaps in communities that are underserved. Tactically, because I'm giving you specifics. That's what I think Tech Equity Miami really should focus on.
Wow, what a fantastic answer. And I think this is exactly why I know that now why you're so passionate about what you're doing with Aire, because this is the data, the qualitative data that you get from doing these reports to say, here's the areas that we need to focus. It's not one thing.
Exactly.
Right? It's not a blanket statement, equity and inclusivity, right? There is tactical things that need to happen on so many different fronts to get where we need to go, right?
Exactly, Will. And it's not that we fix it like that in one fell swoop, but it is a commitment for the long haul, but we got to start somewhere. And we really shouldn't start just because it sounds good. We should start because it makes sense. And
it is good.
And it is good.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm with you. I love that. All right. To wrap it up, I want to do a quick round of rapid fire.
Okay.
All right. So ask some questions and shoot off what, comes at you. How about a book you find yourself most often recommending to other people?
The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
That's a classic.
So good.
Yeah, that's such a good one.
Good.
I find myself rereading that a lot. And I recently heard that Pat Riley, when new players would come to the Heat, that would be the first book that he gives them. Yeah, so he gave that to LeBron when LeBron joined the Heat. That's like a Pat Riley methodology kind of book, apparently.
It's a great way to live your life.
Yeah, for sure. How about favorite podcast at the moment besides ours?
This one
and yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
by the way, name of your podcast so people could check it out. Also.
Innovation City, innovationcity.co. We typically release a new episode every week. We're in a hiatus right now because we just finished our season, but we'll be back soon.
Awesome. Okay, so check that out. Okay, so how about other favorite podcasts?
So this is so tough because I listen to podcasts all the time. So I'll just give you like 2.
Yep.
3. So How I Built This.
Yeah, great one.
So good. Yeah. I just love like hearing people's stories.
Yeah. And they do a good job with the production. Like when they go into like the flashback, they play the music in the background, you know, it's cool.
And I just love the hard parts of people's stories. The other podcast that I absolutely love is Dare to Lead, Brené Brown.
Yeah.
Actually, I have the book. I haven't read it. Maybe I'll read it next week. But some of the people she has on are really, really great. And then, okay, just really quickly.
Yeah.
Meditative Story.
Okay.
By Wait What. It's really good. It's like people's stories of an experience that like draw out meditative themes and they actually meditate. Nice. And then by the same production crew, Spark and Fire, which is a podcast about the story of creativity from a particular like project. So they interviewed the guy that did the architect for the vessel at Hudson Yards. They interviewed the graphic artist that did the Jurassic Park iconic kind of like poster book cover.
That's cool.
So those are my favorites.
Awesome. I love that. It's a lot of good stuff. So we'll leave the links to all those in the description. How about favorite TV show? Like top 3, or do you not watch TV?
I do not watch TV because I write a lot. So I spend a lot of time reading, writing,
but how about
podcasts.
old school classic TV show that you grew up watching?
I actually did not watch a lot of TV.
Really? All right.
But one show that I'm obsessed with.
You didn't get caught up in like the Saved by the Bell stuff?
I watched them, but like it wasn't like...
For me, it was like Saved by the Bell, Family Matters, Full House. You know, that was like the after school special. You know?
We were not allowed to watch TV. We only got an hour of TV.
Oh, that's good.
Or 30 minutes.
Your parents clearly know what they're doing, right?
Jamaican, very strict. Yeah. So I read a ton of books a week. But right now, totally obsessed with Bridgerton.
You know what?
God,
Amanda Getz
so
was on the podcast on Monday, and she said Bridgerton also.
Bridgerton, I almost want to rewatch it again. Yeah. I have a friend that's watched it 3 times. It's so good.
Would Brian and I like Bridgerton?
Yeah.
We would?
Everybody would.
Yeah?
It's so good.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, like back in the day, I loved Scandal. Like anything Shonda Rhimes does is great.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to check Bridgerton out. How about other than Miami or any other place you lived, favorite city in the world?
I mean, I'm from Vancouver, Canada, so obviously Vancouver.
Wow, I mean, I hear a lot of great things about Vancouver. I mean, I see the pictures of Vancouver and the natural beauty that's there. I've never been to the Pacific Northwest. I mean, the furthest north I've been is San Francisco.
Oh.
So I got to check out like Portland and Seattle and Vancouver and all that.
You would love it. But the other cities that I absolutely adore, big fan of Cape Town, love Ubud in Bali and Chiang Mai in Thailand.
Okay, good. Putting those on the bucket list. You know, those are all beautiful cities. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what other career do you think you'd have?
I mean, I don't really believe in having one career.
Yeah, exactly.
So right now, what I realized I love is storytelling and designing really immersive experiences.
Storytelling is like the backbone of everything we do.
Yeah.
Right?
I directed and produced a documentary last year about the work we're doing in Overtown and the Black founders there, and a docuseries. And yeah, I just find myself behind the camera doing a lot of like content direction. Nice. So if I didn't do this, I'd probably just be an investor that also does like a storytelling impact studio.
Love that.
On the side. Love
that. It all ties back into storytelling.
Creativity.
Creativity for sure, and innovating. How about, to wrap it up, the favorite thing about your job right now at Aire Ventures? What's giving you the most fulfillment?
It's a tie. I love my team.
Yeah.
I literally love my team. I don't think I would not work with any other team.
Yeah.
And it's the one time in my life, and I hope they feel the same way, but I think they do. But it's the one time in my life that I really would not work with anybody else.
Awesome.
And the second thing is connecting. Like, one of the superpowers, I love meeting people and making connections and connecting them to the resources, or, you know, if it's the Aire Ventures framework, things that actually can add value. So just making those connections is what I really love.
I love that. Well, if you're down to make a connection with Leigh-Ann, we're going to leave all of her description. Come on. I'm a sucker for a good transition. So we'll leave all of your info in the description box. Where can folks get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach out?
Honestly, Instagram.
Instagram, really?
I'm on Instagram more. Like you can send an email,
okay.
But like Instagram right now,
awesome.
like at Leigh-Ann.Buchanan on
Love
Instagram. I'm Twitter. Yeah, I'm just now getting back into Twitter, but I hate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely hate it. But Instagram, like you can find me on Instagram.
What do you hate about Twitter? Just curious.
So when I was practicing law, I did the type of cases where you should not be active on social media.
Got it.
So I've never been comfortable, and I'm a really private person.
Right.
And the last 4 years have been really challenging with the Twitterverse.
Of course.
But I just find that I'm a person, as you can tell, long form. I like context. I love color.
You don't want to be
depth.
capped at so many characters.
So many characters. And I find it doesn't give enough nuance for me. Whereas Instagram, I can have a picture and have a long form caption and really like tell.
It's more of a canvas.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Awesome. I love that. So we're going to leave Leigh-Ann's Instagram information in the description so you can reach out to her, and aireventures.org, right, for folks to check it out. So
AIRE Ventures.org. And if you really want to send me an email, you can. Leigh-Ann at aireventures.org.
But it would take longer than a DM.
Totally.
Right, cool. Awesome. Thank you, Leigh-Ann. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Will. This was so fun.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I got to come hopefully one day on Innovation City. Right?
For sure.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome.